You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. We cannot always control how other people perceive us. And sometimes even with our best intentions, we come across differently than we mean to. Hello there, and thank you so much for tuning in today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia. For those of you who are new around here, every week I come here to share a bit from within. And what's kind of fun is to reflect on where this whole project began. It started in the heart of the pandemic. My first episode was actually in April of 2020. But the idea had come to me the year prior, when in February of 2019, I was struggling with a lot of panic attacks. I had had this incident that had just kind of, my whole body, my whole nervous system was just shot, and it sent me through months and months of feeling like I was just barely holding on. And I felt as though if I could just share a little bit of what I was going through with other people, like I might not feel so alone, and I might be surprised to know that other people have also gone through it. And so when 2020 came around and we were all kind of in this crazy new experience, navigating through all of the fear and the information coming out and the political lines and the social lines and figuring out our own sense of comfort and depending on where we lived and what our jobs were and what our own health situation was, I thought, this is time. It's time to launch this. And here we are, almost exactly 2 years later. And now every week I just come and I just share a little bit of what's going on inside of me. Sometimes we have guests. Last week we had Dr. Alyssa Edoff. She's a veterinarian. She runs her own business here in Colorado. We were talking about perfecting the work-life balance. And next week I have another amazing guest. Her name is Stephanie Moss, and she is a medical student now in Chicago. And that will be a conversation all around authenticity and stepping into your own truth and kind of, I guess, in a way, we didn't use these words, I don't think, during the podcast. We were talking quite a bit about dealing with imposter syndrome, and just how do you navigate your way through something that you've never done before. So amazing conversation there. I'm so excited for next week's episode. So if you're not already subscribed to the A Bit From Within podcast, I would love it if you do so. And finally, the last thing I wanted to share that's kind of new is I have created a new level for our Patreon page for those of you who just love the podcast and would love to listen ad-free. So if you want to support me directly and what we're doing here at A Bit From Within, and you just want to listen to ad-free episodes of the podcast, you can actually subscribe on Patreon for $3 a month and get full access to all of these episodes ad-free. It's a really wonderful community to be a part of. We have other options as far as membership. We have versions that send our self-care and lunar guides straight to you. We have versions that include a whole library of guided meditations. And then it kind of progresses to all of the yoga offerings that I have, including the live yoga classes that we do twice a month. And at the heart of the A Bit From Within mission, like my mission is to remind people to be gentle with themselves and to remember that those moments in your life where you feel like you're striving and you feel like you're kind of up against the momentum of life, that those are the moments when it is so important to be kind to yourself. And sometimes we need new ways and inspiration to do that. And that's another big part of my mission. So whether it's the podcast or the self-care guide or different offers, like that is the voice that I am in this world, is reminding you to be yourself, to be gentle with yourself, to learn who you are through the variety of different tools out there. Some people love the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs. I really love astrology, and astrology has led me to such a deeper permission of who I am, and is something that I often integrate into the conversation here at A Bit From Within, just even if you're not quite sure that you believe in astrology or whatnot, I always say just think of the themes and consider the themes that, kind of get discussed with the different zodiacs, and maybe just consider if it resonates with something that's going on in your life. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of the heart of my mission right now. And on today's episode, I didn't actually come in with an exact set plan. I wanted to really speak from the heart. This last week was a really crazy one for me. In full transparency, Dave and I spent a lot of the last week kind of at odds with each other, kind of leading up to me having to fly to Texas on Friday for a dear friend's sister's wedding. And I was very excited to go connect with my friend and be there in Texas and, be with her and her family. But just, the idea of like having to pack up all my stuff and get through security and fly when I've been having a lot of travel anxiety ever since last summer. Our trip to Chicago, it was the first plane ride that I had taken since the pandemic. So like almost 2 years later. Actually, I should try to think. The last flight that I had taken prior to August 2021 was in, I guess, October 2018. Yep, October 2018. So, it had been almost 3 years. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, because traveling, I've just been really thinking about the travel anxiety and what is this and how can I work through this, because I want to travel. I want traveling to be a part of my life. Like, how can I cope with this fear that I have? And I think it boils down to practice, right? Like, you have to practice something to build up that sense of strength. And the less you practice something, the more unfamiliar you are with it, the more you might psych yourself out or be scared if something happens or not have that faith in yourself that you can deal with it. So I think that that's another big piece of a little bit of what I'm working through, is that there had been so long without any practice. And then the first time back is when Dave had an arrhythmia with his heart on the plane ride, and it just caused this huge heightened sense of panic. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, during that time between the plane rides is also when I went through this huge struggle with my own panic disorder, and I lost a lot of that faith in myself to handle things in a high stress environment. And I just feel a little bit different now. So I'm having to kind of slowly navigate this thing. And for me, there was a lot of stress internally leading up to last week. And not to mention that we just have a lot going on in our lives right now. Last night I was actually texting back and forth with my cousin, and I was feeling I was feeling a little bit ashamed, actually, because my bandwidth to have a lot of things on my agenda right now is very limited. And like many of us out there, there's this sense of pressure of like, you should be able to handle it all. I know a lot of people are going through this with like having to work back in the office after time working back home. It's like that adds this whole new dynamic of mental exhaustion, whether it's driving to and from your workplace, and now with the gas prices, and or just being around other people, or having to eat lunch. Like, think about packing your lunch instead of eating out of your refrigerator. Like, there's a lot of mental load that comes with that switch. And I know that many of us out there, even if you're not going through that exact scenario, there's just this sense right now that like our bandwidth to handle all of the things that are being asked of us, it feels very limited right now. And so for me, I was having this sense of shame coming up, because I'm like, I really don't know if I can fit in all of the things that all of the people expect of me right now. And that's definitely something that I kind of feel when I start to get really overwhelmed, is I'm like, everybody wants too much of me right now. Like my to-do list, I'm always talking about my to-do list. It feels so long right now. It's exhausting. And I kind of go into this fight or flight mode where I'm just like, I want to fight my way through the to-do list and just kind of cut things off and try to clear it up as much as I can just so I can feel a little bit of relief. So anyway, getting back to my point, I was texting with my cousin and we were just talking about how she just said a couple things that made me feel a lot better about where I'm at, like just kind of sharing like, yeah, when you go on a trip, even a weekend trip, like it throws things off in your life. Like it takes like a week to recover from that. And I'm like, oh, thank you for telling me that, because I'm back from my trip now and I already feel like I need to just snap back into things. And I felt this all day yesterday. I got home really late on Saturday night, and then Sunday was daylight savings time. We had a live yoga class, which went amazing, and I'll share more about that later. But I just was looking around the house and I'm like feeling so stressed out. I'm like, our floors are so dirty right now. The laundry's behind. I haven't watered the plants. The garage is a mess. Like the trash cans are still like not in their proper places from trash day on Friday. Like everything just felt out of control. And I also had no energy, literally no energy. And so I was kind of trying to find that balance. As a person who is constantly talking about self-care and self-kindness, I've been really trying to turn the flashlight back on myself and be like, are you living what you're talking about? Like if you're asking others to have that permission to slow down, to reprioritize, like, are you doing that? And it's really hard because I have this anxious kind of underbelly where it's just like, I want things to be perfect and I want to feel a sense of control, especially in my house. So I'm like, okay, what doesn't feel too hard to do and how can I spread it out? So I just spent the day kind of slowly getting through laundry and telling myself like, okay, I really want to watch this show, but I'll just take our vacuum mop thing to the floors downstairs. I'll do that once and then I'm going to lay down and watch the show for a little bit. So just trying to spread it out as opposed to being in like cleaning mode and then you can rest is like, how do you kind of intermingle that a little bit more? And that felt pretty good. And then, finally, just before I went to bed last night, I just wrote a really actually long to-do list of like all of the things that I feel like I need to get done today, knowing that I am also giving myself permission that if there's anything on that list today that I just can't do, that I can reassign it to other days of this week. And that just kind of felt good. It's a strategy that I've used quite a bit when I get really overwhelmed is if I can just write it all down and not try to do it when I'm in that I don't know if it's a negative state of mind, but just maybe more anxious or kind of down or low energy. Like that is not a place that I have found is very good to work from. I usually make mistakes when I'm working from that place, or I make more irrational decisions, or I don't do things fully because I'm just trying to get by. And so when I kind of make that list and I say, okay, I can get to this tomorrow, I've built up this level of confidence within myself that I can get things done a lot faster and kind of really kind of take a machete to the list and like knock through a lot of it when I have it more organized. And so that's kind of what today looked like before I sat down and recorded. I had a long list of emails that I had to send. I had to do some stuff with my accounting. We're in the middle of tax season and those kind of things, these things that can be kind of draining. But because I had already kind of compartmentalized it in my mind of like, I'm going to take care of all these things, I was able to get it done in less than an hour. And that felt so good. And now I definitely have less weight on my shoulders. And I feel like I'm able to show up more fully for this conversation. But yes, going back to this idea of just like, it's so nice to hear from other people. Like when my cousin was like, yeah, it takes a week to recover. Or we were kind of just also chatting back and forth about how having a lot of engagements on your to-do list, or like when your family schedule gets a little bit crazy, like it is very hard. It definitely eats into that bandwidth, whether you want it to or not. And that is something that I'm definitely going through because my partner, Dave, he's really struggling with His health, that's the best way to put it right now. He's still just really struggling with his health, and he is pursuing a treatment with hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. And so he is 5 days a week over about a town about 45 minutes away every morning from 7 to 8:30 a.m. having this treatment. And so he has to leave the house at 6 and he gets home around 9, 9:15, 9:30. And even when I don't go with him, like sometimes I'll go with him and I'll go hang out at a coffee shop and just get work done really early in the morning. But even when I don't go with him, it throws our whole little like family life schedule / calendar off because, with everything he has going on, with not feeling well and working a 9 to 5 and trying to navigate through his health, he needs, a good amount of sleep. And so he's having to go to bed at like 8 or maybe 9, like 9 is like late. He's usually asleep in the 8 o'clock hour. And that just, that kind of an early bedtime just throws everything off. And of course, I'm a light sleeper. So like even him waking up at 6 is waking me up. And sometimes I can sleep for a little bit longer, but it's kind of messing with everything, right? And when he has to go to bed at 8, like we have to eat a lot earlier than that because with his digestion, he needs time to digest before he falls asleep. So, it's just rocking my world. And, all of this health stuff has been rocking my world anyway. I won't go into that as much right now because it feels a little bit like the same old story, but it has been really, really hard. And it is so comforting when I get to talk to people who have actually kind of lived that life or had to navigate through that with their partner, because like the truth is like what Dave is going through is absolutely life-changing. He's seeing his relationships different. He's noticing the way that people are treating him with what he's going through. It's a very personal thing, and it's hard. It's taken a huge effect on our relationship because even last week, there was this tension between us of like me kind of feeling like fed up with not really being looked out for, not really being seen inside of the relationship because, he's having a flare up with his health right now and he can't see anything past that. And so me feeling all of the stress and pressure of everything that I've got on my plate right now, and all of the anxiety that I was feeling about traveling and about just making sure I had everything ready to go. And there's this inevitable thing. It's like when something big is going on where you're like, okay, also there's these other pieces that I have to go to deal with, whether it's the taxes or this financial planning that we're doing, or just relationships. Who have I not been able to be in contact with? Trying to do, the podcast and grow my A Bit From Within business, as well as keep a hold on and manage the Felicia Marty photography. And it's just a lot. I'm complaining right now, and I'm probably starting to ramble just a little bit, but there's pieces in all of that just have to do with trying to manage myself and my self-care. Last week I decided to start seeing a therapist of my own. That's something I've done before, but I haven't had consistently in the past couple years. And I just really am feeling that need right now for my own care, or not even self-care, my own mental health right now, my own mental and emotional well-being. And then I really did feel like going on my trip. It was so good for my heart. Just being around my close friends, and her family they all feel like friends of mine too now. And just even building up that muscle of that resilience, like in spite of the anxiety. I honestly am trying to learn my new process around dealing with that anxiety. And some of it is not quite so fun. Before I went to the airport, I was feeling so nervous. I couldn't even put my finger on why, but I almost threw up. And then I just found myself, my mom drove me to the airport, and I found myself kind of crying, like just like tearing up. And I just knew it was I needed a release. But I did implement some strategies that just kind of helped me. So if you're really resonating with any fear around flying, or if you get anxious around traveling, you can feel free to borrow any of these. One thing that I really aimed to do was to go slow and to be intentional. So I did not wear my headphones while I was navigating the airport. I was not texting or on my phone at all. I wasn't scrolling on TikTok or Instagram. These are things that many of us do just to kind of avoid being where we are, just kind of be somewhere else. But for me, I've noticed that actually really, really stirs up kind of that Vata energy, which is just a lot of movement, a lot of airiness, and can be also linked to like anxiety. It's not always a bad thing, Vata energy. Vata energy is also very creative and light and spiritual and all of these things, but it can also be that kind of anxious, frenetic pace. And so while I was already feeling anxious, I needed to do things to ground myself. So walking a little bit slower, not scrolling, not having extra sensory input, really just trying to observe, like, who's standing in front of me, who's standing next to me, what's going on that this line is taking so long, how is this airport laid out, like just trying to appreciate the design a little bit more, as opposed to just being kind of a cow moving through the system, being kind of herded. And that helped quite a bit. And just I had plenty of time to be able to do that, so I wasn't stressed about getting anywhere quickly. And then I actually had like this list on my phone of like things I can do while traveling. So like once I got settled, I had bought a magazine. I like to play Sudoku. So I was like reminding myself that I had downloaded some podcasts and some books to my phone so that when I was settled and ready to kind of have that input, I could do that. I had some work I could do on my laptop, just things that kind of gave me that permission to like occupy myself. And then the other thing that I did is I didn't tell my friend this. If she ever listens to this, she would probably giggle a little bit. But I just put some pictures of my friend's family and Dallas, where I was headed, on my phone, as just this idea of like visualizing, this is where I'm going, this is why I'm going there, and really rooting myself in that part of the journey. Like the journey is to get you to this place, and that really helped as well. So it ended up going great. Had a really quick, safe flight there. It was a whirlwind of a trip. We spent most of the day on Friday kind of at the church, kind of where the wedding was, getting it ready and looking at different things and having the rehearsal. And then I was able to go to the rehearsal dinner with everyone and just have fun chatting. And then went to bed. Then the next day, it was just wedding time. So right from the morning, it started kind of early. We did all the pictures, had the ceremony, a really sweet reception, and then that was it. I stuck around with everyone to clean everything up, and then got to go back to my friend's family's house where we could just chat a little bit more. And then it was already time to leave. Like, it was such a quick trip. And I will say, I thought to myself, it was better to take a red eye home, save a little bit of money, not staying in Dallas a second night. And I knew I was going to be a little bit tired, but I figured that was overall best. Like, might as well just, rip the Band-Aid off, like just get back home, get back into the swing of things. But my flight was supposed to leave at 10 p.m. and it was delayed. It was delayed only like 30 minutes, which is not bad at all. It was delayed till 10:30, but then we didn't even start boarding the plane until 10:30. So it was a little bit of a later night than, and just a longer, when you're in that place of like, what are we doing? When's the flight going to leave? Why are we waiting? And the other thing was really interesting. I mean, I was already a little like sensory overloaded by the end of the day that day anyway, but the Dallas, I was at Love Field, it was so loud there. Like, it felt like every single person at the gate and the gates nearby was just talking out loud. Like, it was 10 p.m. and there was so much conversation happening that you could hardly hear the overhead speakers. And then the other thing is that you can hear all of the overhead speakers at multiple gates. So you we're having like 2 or 3 sometimes overhead messages at one time, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm about ready to lose it. That was kind of my the worst part of traveling, to be honest. And then just got on the plane, zoomed home, and all of that went really well. And so I do feel like I built up that muscle a little bit. Now I need to keep practicing so that I can really remember. I'm like, Felicia, you are not scared of airplanes. You are able to do this. I've just got to keep building that muscle. So anyway, this is kind of a long introduction to where I've been at lately, but let's dive into this week's Astro segment. As often as I can on these episodes where I'm just kind of talking, I love to have a small portion of the podcast dedicated to what's happening astrologically right now. And right now we are kind of just on the eve in a couple days, actually. So it's on Friday, March 18th is when the full moon happens. And this one will be in Virgo. Right now we are in Pisces season, so the full moon will always be in the sign of the opposite of the sun during a full moon. So full moon in Virgo. And this is going to be just this, full moons are a beautiful opportunity to find illumination. And I'm really sticking with this word of illumination. You'll hear a lot of astrologers and different people talking about using the full moon for release. And I think that's a beautiful thing too. But the reason I like the word illumination a little bit more is because there is a sense around like if you think of the full moon almost as like this flashlight shining down, giving all of this light. And you can even think of it as, the sun's light is reflecting off the surface of the moon and bouncing back down to us. There is the sense of, here is all of this light. Well, what does light do for us? One, it guides our way. So it helps us to see clearly. So when you can see clearly, like, what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you to do a lot of things. One, it allows you to see what is in front of you. And you might use that as an opportunity to celebrate where you've been going. And even like the success that you're having and the projects that you're working on right now. It might be one of those moments where you just want to get together with friends and you want to have a bonfire or drink some wine and talk and celebrate together. Or it can be this moment where you're like, okay, I've been working on this trajectory and it is not going well. Or even, it doesn't even have to be going poorly. It could just be, where can I improve? Where can I readjust things? Where can I make like micro changes in order to be even more on target? And sometimes what we have to do, like anybody who's in a creative field especially knows that when you're editing something, you often have to lose things, right? Like lose sections of your original ideas or original concepts to kind of shape it and make it even better. So that is where I think release really comes in. So release doesn't always have to be, oh, you're going to cry every full moon or you're going to, break a habit. These are things that you absolutely can do. There are beautiful ways to possibly celebrate the full moon, but there is no one way to do that, right? Like there is no one way to say, I need to make changes here. I need to edit. And depending on how you feel about it, you might be very attached to what you currently are working through. And it is going to be a very emotional process to make those changes and find that surrender. Or it could be something that you're, really excited to kind of keep perfecting and you're really in like hand in hand with that process of change and editing. So you might feel really excited about this. I think for this full moon in particular, with it being in Virgo, I will share with you a little piece of the guide that I create. Every month I create a lunar guide / self-care guide. It's about 10 pages and you can get it right off my website. If you're a Patreon member, you get it already sent right to your inbox. But I go through for the entire lunar month ahead, like where is the sign of the new moon? What are some concepts or themes we can think about during this time and some things for you to consider? I include a new moon ritual. And then exact same thing for the full moon. Here's more of what this full moon is about. Here's some questions to ask yourself, and here's a full moon ritual. And then there's a couple other goodies in there as well. So if you are interested, definitely go to my website and check it out, the monthly self-care guide. But this is right from that guide. It's, this full moon is on this Pisces and Virgo axis. And the thing to know about that is that Pisces and Virgo share mutable qualities, and they both have this ability to understand exactly what could be different. The earth sign of Virgo wants to kind of purify and fix and perfect, especially like it wants to get in there and be like, these things could be different. It has a critical eye. And Pisces, it wants to just give space to that understanding. It wants to give expression and compassion and be more in the feels of it. It's the water sign. And so these are both very beautiful examples of the feminine qualities of earth and water. So this full moon in particular, you might feel that this is a beautiful time to be receptive, to really think about those big questions kind of swimming inside of you, and to maybe even start to wrestle with or closely examine those intentions that you've set or what you've been working on, what you're trying to achieve, and really ask yourself, like, where can I improve? This might come with a lot of that more like water side intuition, where you can really just understand the situation better, or maybe figure out a way to express where you are. Or you can really tap into that earth side, where you're going to be thinking through that more critical lens of, how can I improve this? Where can I make changes? Where do I need more clarity? And both are beautiful. Maybe do a little bit of both. So that's something you can definitely think about with this full moon. And I will say that the full moon ritual in this month's guide is all about illumination. It is an illumination ritual. So if you want to create your own, or if you want to borrow the one that I have instructions for in here, my suggestion is that you kind of pair the earth and the water elements, and you take some time to reflect, and then you also take some time to express. And you can do those in either order, whatever is feeling better for you in the situation that you're wanting to kind of think on or reflect on or intend for. But I think, that's going to be something that we could all kind of do. And it's nice that it's over a weekend, if you feel like you have a little bit more time on the weekends. This full moon is on Friday. And so you can do it right on the full moon, or you can, of course, kind of do it a day after. So I usually say don't do it before the 18th, because that's still kind of in like new moon energy vibes. Like we're still moving towards the full moon. But that's just my own way of thinking about it. You do you. When it comes to any of these processes, I think that we all have our own unique way of seeing things that make sense to us. And I always say use your own sense of what feels right as your guide. So the last thing I wanted to really spend a little time talking about today is how we are perceived. I think that one thing that can kind of get a little bit messy in any of our lives has to do with how other people perceive us. And there are a lot of people out there who will say, like, I don't care what other people think of me. And I think there's a lot of people that genuinely do feel that way. Actually, Dave and I were just talking about this, and he is very much along the lines of being like, I really don't give a crap what other people think about me. Now, me, on the other hand, if I were to say that, I would be lying, because as much as I would love to disregard and not judge myself for the way that I think I'm coming across to others, like, I do care. I do care how I'm perceived, and I don't come across as inauthentic, or I don't do things that are against my personal values in order to achieve that, right? But it's still something that I carry with me, and it matters to me that I be of service, and that I help others, and that I live in step with what I speak, things like that. Like, that really matters to me, and I feel like it helps me feel like I am a good person and that I have good values, and I'm proud of that. And I want to be around other people who see that. And it would probably hurt my feelings if somebody accused me of not being that, because I spend so much time and it's such a big part of how I want to move through the world. But I think that sometimes, we cannot always control how other people perceive us. And sometimes even with our best intentions, we come across differently than we mean to. And the thing that I've been thinking about is how important it is that we take a moment, kind of like, actually this full moon would be perfect for it, to take the moment and to shine this light back on ourselves and just ask, are my actions and the way that I'm moving through the world, the things that I'm saying, the things that I'm sharing, are they having my intended effect? And if you don't know what your intentions are, that might be a place to begin and really be thoughtful. What am I trying to do as I move through this world? What are the biggest priorities to me right now? That could be your family, that could be growing your business, that could be your relationships or your friendships, it could be pursuing a career change or moving up in your career. There's so many things that you could have as your priority right now. It could be a certain message that you're trying to share with the world, or something that's really affected you or that's just really important to you right now, like parenting or a class you're taking or, anything else like that. You can obviously think of your own examples that resonate with you. And, once you're really clear on that, you can really start to think about, like, am I living in harmony with this priority or this intention? Are the actions that I'm taking in my life, are they actually in step with what I am pursuing? And I think for some of us, somewhere along the way, things kind of get a little bit messy. I'm going to think of an example like, let's say that you are just super close with your family and one of your siblings needs something from you, or you're having like a special weekend that, you're all together, you're all going through a lot. And yet, you say that your family is very important to you. You say you want to be there for your siblings. You say you want to show up. And yet you are distracted by the other things you have going on in your life. Like maybe you're in a new relationship and you are only thinking about that person's experience, and you find yourself withdrawing from your family and your real priorities to fit into somebody else's priorities. I would say that is a distraction away from what you actually value. Now, could it work in reverse? Could it be, hey, the biggest thing that is important to me right now is my relationship. I really want to fall in love. I really prioritize the people I spend the most time with. That is where my biggest focus is. And now my family wants all of these things from me, but I am not able to show up for those things. So I'm going to set limits with them, and I'm not going to show up the way that they expect me to. And I'm not going to feel sorry for that because I want to be in sync with my priorities, right? Those are two very different paths that you could be on in this kind of messy scenario. And you can see how it could happen that the messiness kind of comes when you try to straddle both lines, right? Like it's our people pleasing that makes it so messy when we're like, oh, well, really my priorities are here, but I'm going to kind of pretend that they're also here. And trying to straddle both lines hurts people on both sides, right? Like your family's not happy with you, your partner's not happy with you, and you're probably just left feeling like you've been put through the ringer, or that you've missed the mark somehow for both. That is why I think it is so important to reflect on how you're being perceived, and it's not because it's a matter of caring what other people think. It's a matter of kind of checking yourself on, am I coming across how I intend to? And if we're not, then we can really make those changes and those edits and adjustments, or maybe make amends or set new boundaries in order to be more in alignment and to have more clarity and success in how we feel on a day-to-day basis. For me personally, speaking of this, like, this is a lot of what I felt like I was going through last week with Dave. We were just kind of at odds with each other, like I mentioned, all week. And I think it's because both of us were not perceiving each other how we intended to. I want him to always know that I am here for him and that I want to know where he's at mentally. Like, even when it's hard, even when it's the same thing over and over, like, I want to be in step with what he's experiencing right now. And I also want him to be in step with what I'm going through. I want to feel that level of deep communication and knowledge of each other. I wanted him to know what I was feeling, why I was feeling stressed, the things I had on my mind, just everything I was trying to do. I want him to know it so that he can see me more fully and he can look out for me when I am barely holding on by a string, or when I am, having a lot of self-doubt about how I'm able to show up. I want to be seen by my person. And, for him, he is, like I've mentioned prior, like, he just can't see past his experience, and especially during this kind of immune flare-up that he's having. He's carrying a lot of fear around his health. He's carrying a lot of worry, and he's also mourning the loss of his health. The ability for him to go work out, to go to take on different physical projects, especially with our business, the ability to go shoot a wedding and feel like he can be there for me and for our business. He's mourning all of that. And that is what he sees, and one of the things that we're kind of missing with each other right now is he's in this place where, health is everything. And the fact that I have my health is something that, it's almost like if you have your health, then there's nothing else to stress about. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but that's kind of something that I've saw out of him recently. And for me, it's like, yeah, I have my health, but I also have this immense pressure on my shoulders that I'm trying my best to deal with. And it just because I'm healthy, it doesn't take away of the stuff that I'm navigating in my life and in my experience. And so we were both just missing each other, and definitely not at all coming across as how either of us were trying to or intending to be perceived. Like, I was perceiving him as really cold and really shut off and not caring about me at all. And I think he was perceiving me as, trying to distract him, like being very woe is me and trying to make mountains out of molehills and trying to, make it seem like what I was going through is more important and not acknowledging him. So there was a miss there, and it helps that we've kind of worked through that now. It was really painful though while we were going through that, especially during this high stress time in our lives. And ultimately, I don't know that I have major solutions to it other than that piece of self-awareness. Sometimes you're going to be in a hard area, and the more that you are aware of yourself, what matters to you, and what your intentions are, the more clear you can be. And then vice versa, like, if you are aware of those things, then you can also be aware of how maybe you're coming across, and if that is, again, being received as intended. And it's not really up to you, right? Like, something that we've been talking a lot about, I've been thinking about, is like, unfortunately, like, how you are perceived by others is not up to you, because you're going to be perceived the way that others are perceiving you. And you, again, might just not give a hoot about that. Or you can use that as an example of, do I need to course correct it all or clarify? And of course, I think the place this matters most is in the circles that are closest to you, your relationships, your partnerships, maybe your work environment or your family, just it kind of depends on what your kind of inner rings look like. And, that's something that I just feel like I have to spend a little bit of time myself over this next week thinking of. My own intentions for this next week are to get my feet back beneath me. And I feel like that is something that I constantly am working on, and something that I'm giving myself full permission to slowly continue to come back to this practice where I have to slow back down, get myself beneath me. I'm actually really grateful for yesterday's live yoga class that we did, because we were talking about this spring equinox coming up and this idea of kind of being in hibernation and coming out of hibernation, and how the world kind of expects us just to snap into this fast pace and to handle all of these things, when really we literally might be in a place where we're feeling more dormant, or we're feeling really tired or really drained. And maybe it's not actually so natural just to snap into this rhythm that is so intense and so fast and so demanding. And so how can we give ourselves more time to rest and to come out of the rest in a place that feels very authentic and organic for us? And so I created this yoga practice for yesterday that was, I almost call it giving yourself permission to be the bear in hibernation and just coming out of that place. And it ended up being this very grounding practice that has a lot of moments of a restorative quality and a yin quality, and then kind of marrying a little bit of flow and release in some of the tight areas of our body, like our neck and shoulders, and as well as our hips. So if you are a yogi and that sounds good to you, this class is available in the Patreon page, and I might also make it available on my website. So if you're interested and you don't see it there, just ping me and I can get that added. So I guess that is it for today, you guys. I've already shared long enough. Let's do a card drawing every week. At the end of the episode, we do a card drawing. Just this way to just kind of have the universe kind of weigh in on whatever we've been talking about. So this week I've got the Affirmators Love and Relationships deck. Oh, and here it already one popping right up into my hands. This one is Giving. I welcome the idea of give and take in my relationships, and I eagerly practice the give part. By giving freely, I discover just how fun giving really is. Giving my time, care, and attention to someone else actually gives me good feelings, which makes me want to give more. Does this selfishness make me look selfish? Be honest. I love these cards because they have these kind of cute little jokes on them as well, but it's so true. Ugh. Now I'm trying to think about how this idea of giving kind of goes into everything else we've been talking about. Because, there is this idea of giving to others. But, so much of what I feel like I've been struggling with this past week is that I'm not really giving to myself. I kind of get into this flow, especially when I get really overwhelmed and anxious, of just following all of the sets of things that everybody else needs of me. And I forget that I need to give to myself too. I need to give myself time. I need to give myself kindness. I need to give myself space. I need to give myself a rest. And when I can give myself those things, then I really can give to others so much more fully as well. But operating at that deficit, it's just not sustainable. All right, well, feel free to share any of your thoughts or your own bits from within, how any of this resonated with you. I will be back next week with that wonderful conversation with Stephanie Moss. Absolutely check it out. Subscribe to the podcast. And if you haven't had a chance to leave us a rating or a review wherever you listen to your podcast, please know it would mean the world to me. Thank you again for joining me today, and until next time.